Hey, there we go. Look at that. Hi, everyone. How are
How
we
are
doing?
you?
I am good, thanks. I have no idea what day it is. I don't know what's going on. I know there's SEO to do and sites to speed up, so all is well with the world.
Let me say a couple of words about you. Jono is a digital strategist, marketing technologist, and full stack developer. As head of SEO at Yoast, he makes decisions that influence the organic visibility of over 13 million websites across WordPress, Shopify, and beyond. His experience includes working with startups, agencies, and some other of the world's biggest brands. On his side, he writes that aside from web development, he loves futurology and science fiction. So fasten your seatbelts and let's fly to a progressive technical SEO world with him today. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to you, Jono. Here you are.
Nice. Thank you very much. Well, thanks for having me. What a pleasure to be here. I am going to share my second screen and we'll see if that works. There we go. Cool. Let's attempt to do that. And well, it's always complicated, isn't it? Right, I have shared that. Do you need to go and make that? There we go. Cool. Are we keeping me big? That's really, there we go. I'm nice and in the corner now. Cool. Right. Yeah. So we've got lots to get through. So I'm going to go quite fast. But as we mentioned, this will be recorded. So you can catch up on the details later if you want to. So let's talk about website performance, why it matters, how you can measure it and boost it. And with an SEO mindset in particular, why should we care about this? Why should we prioritize this? Is this the most important thing ever? Maybe, maybe not. Let's find out. So let's start with the easiest bit. Does it matter and why it matters? Well, all of the research that we have shows that every minute and every hour that we invest as businesses and people are optimizing sites into improving the performance of our websites drives an outsized return. And if you really want to spend hours and hours and hours going and digging through and trying to validate that, go check out WPRocket.com. This is a really good resource where there are hundreds, thousands of case studies of research pieces which paint a really explicit picture of just how important speed in all of its many flavors are. They do a great job of creating them. You can browse by time, by metrics, and so on. And essentially, any questions you have about should I care about this can be answered there with an industry like yours, with a website like yours. Really straightforward, really nice. I'm not going to go through hundreds of these as we have only a certain amount of time, but I do want to focus on one in particular, which was a study run by Deloitte, who I'm sure everyone's heard of, in 2020. They analyzed a couple of hundred websites, and they found that a 0.1 second improvement in overall site speed load time consistently drove a 10% uplift in conversion rates. And that's across consumer retail, lead generation in multiple sectors in the UK and US, and not just direct to consumers. They found equivalent uplifts in the B2B space, about 7%. Now, 0.1 seconds is the amount of time it takes for you to blink. You're losing a potential 10% of additional revenue in the time of an eye blink while users wait for your website to load. What's happening here is that we're competing for subconscious attention. And of course, nobody is saying, oh, I blinked and it's not loaded. I'm now going to consciously abandon my purchase journey. It's not how this works. Nobody's saying that took 200 milliseconds too long. I'm going to spend my money with a competitor. The point is that a half-second delay or an annoyance, an error, anything similar might mean that I glance at my phone or look out the window or switch tabs or even maybe just wonder what's for lunch. So you're not just competing against comparable businesses, you're competing against Netflix, against whatever's happening outside, against buyer's regret, against all the notifications popping up on my laptop. Every millisecond you leave me waiting means that those other needs potentially gain more focus and attention. And in the meantime, you're frustrating and irritating me subconsciously and reducing the likelihood of conversion and engagement. So given all of that, you would think that everyone would be on top of all of this. You think that they'd be actively investing in performance and speed and laughing all the way to the bank. Well, let's see some data and see if that's really the case. This is a study performed by Pingdom in 2018. They are a performance monitoring platform, and they analyzed the top 100 e-commerce sites on the web based on Alexa's dataset and categorized their performance into broad grades. These are an amalgamation of a whole bunch of metrics that look at things like loading times, file sizes, objective user experience metrics, and so on. And their findings were that most sites are relatively slow. The majority, in fact, score a C or a D, which means they didn't do very well. Now, if this was your child's school report, a C or a D might be a little disappointing, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. For a business that's competing to win or grow or just survive, I think it's gross incompetence or criminal negligence. These sites have direct competitors, and losing milliseconds is like losing ground in a war of attrition on attention. Now, the study goes on to break down the best and worst performing sites. Here we see the slowest, the worst 10, some of which you'll recognize, like Gap, Best Buy, Under Armour. Now, as I mentioned, this is from 2018, so it's a little dated. So I thought, you know what we'll do? We'll check these sites today and see how they're doing and see if anything's changed. So let's start by looking at Gap.com. They've been around for 50 years. They've got 3,500 stores internationally. They've had a monumental impact on popular culture and fashion, and they score an E. Their website isn't fast. In fact, when I use Google Chrome's developer tools to emulate a mid-tier mobile phone on a 3G connection, it takes 13 seconds for the products banner to load. That's time during which I look out the window, during which I get annoyed, be less likely to shop, and so on. So they're almost certainly harming their engagement, conversion, revenue, and so on and so forth, all the way down their funnel across all their marketing activities and channels. Best Buy score an E, one of the biggest retail brands in the US by revenue. They win countless awards for their operational standards. Oh, this goes on and on. They score an F. Everybody's come across Under Armour, who are famously marketed around their own physical performance. They score a D. Interestingly, their site's quite fast, but the sheer weight of their analytics and their tracking takes so long to fire that people leave before it triggers. They're self-sabotaging incredibly. These are all really bad. I won't make you go through all of them. They've been bad since 2018. Many of them have been bad since 2012, since Pingdom started doing the research. Maybe this is a little unfair. If they've been bad for a decade, then maybe they're not representative. So let's look a bit broader. What about all the clever disruptive startups? Maybe it's just legacy e-commerce that's slow. Maybe newer agile brands who are winning markets and winning awards have faster websites. You would expect so. Well, maybe not. Packed in the coffee market, C. Impossible Foods in the meats market, D. Purple, who are disrupting the mattress industry, which is one of the most competitive spaces on the web, and F. There is a pattern here, right? They're doing incredible things, but not with their websites. Maybe they're confusing move fast and break things with just have a broken website. So maybe the household giants are doing this right. Somebody has to be, surely. Nope. Coca-Cola, a global monopoly on hydration, C. Forbes, one of the most influential publishers in the world, C. Dell, one of the largest technology companies in the world, C. Nvidia, forerunners in the machine learning and AI revolution, score an E. Vodafone, one of the most significant telco companies on the planet, score an F, despite having published a case study on Google's own web.dev site last year, describing how they ran an A/B test to improve their speed, which delivered massive uplifts in conversion rate. Most websites are slow and bad. And this isn't the case of a few bad apples. I have, yes, cheated a little and picked some to make a point, but generally speaking, this is representative of the state of the web. Outside of this, there are a few companies who do well. For example, Disney, PayPal, Netflix, Deliveroo. They've invested a huge amount of resource in making their websites fast. And as consumers, you can see that, you can understand it, and it's a big part of the experience of using their platforms. But even then, they're only getting some stuff right. Most websites are problematic and slow. And it's easy to understand why. It's always the same kind of story. It's things like they have huge image and video files. They don't consider serving media appropriately to different devices or different formats, or lazy loading things. Or worse, they're using legacy techniques that haven't been updated in a decade that make things slower. Or their servers and hosting are running outdated technologies like older PHP versions, or they're not configured optimally for the software they're running, or there's insufficient hardware. Or their JavaScript and CSS is a nightmare. They're using huge bundles and files and boilerplates and not splitting their code and managing what loads how and where, and using modern standards to consider the device types and capabilities and so on. And this is just part of it. They're using dead-end or hand-built platforms and content management systems that don't have the tools to implement this kind of stuff. And then aside from that, they're generally just missing standards. Things like incorrect HTTP headers and missing cache configuration options and dodgy backend setups and so on and so forth. And in fairness, it's easy to understand why this is the case. Improving many of these things is arcane. That's why many of you are here today. This stuff is complex and it's hard to know where to start. It's a mix of back-end dev, front-end, databases, servers, pixels, PHP, processes, and even more tricky, people. And often against a backdrop of technical debt, a lack of ownership, a lack of processes, and so on. So it's really hard to quantify and manage and to ask questions like, how well are we doing? And what's our direction of travel? Or what's the benchmark versus our competitors? Or even more importantly, if we spend X, what will this deliver? So understandably, many organizations haven't prioritized investing in speed over more tangible, achievable goals. I'm excited to think there is now a solution for this, that we do have the ability to start speeding things up. We have tools, we have metrics, and we have framing that make it possible to prioritize and quantify and execute. As I'm sure everyone is aware, in 2020, which was a while ago now, right? Google announced their Core Web Vitals initiative. They introduced 3 new metrics: largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. We don't have time to go into detail on how these work, and it's not very interesting, but suffice it to say, collectively, these do a pretty good job of defining how fast a page is in a way that's comparable and measurable over time. What I do want to dwell on for a moment is the naming convention, Core Web Vitals. I think that leaves little room for misunderstanding, but many people overlook this. They're not called important considerations that you should think about putting on your roadmap. They're critical, fundamental requirements. They are the cost of entry. And I think understanding and excelling on Core Web Vitals is absolutely critical if you want to succeed online in the coming months and years. Handily, there are all sorts of tools to measure this. And I've just seen a question come in about hacks to speed up learning processes. Yes, there are loads of tools you can use to measure this kind of stuff. By the way, throughout all of this, there are links under the slides that you can go and read and explore. Core Web Vitals are easy to monitor and understand and measure now. There are loads of tools. You can check aggregate performance over time in Search Console. You can look at a specific URL at a point in time in Page Speed Insights. You can bake automatic analysis into your technical release processes for your code base. If you've got sophisticated developers, you can do this in 20 different places over time. All of this is readily available. Interestingly, beyond just the lab data that you get from spot testing, so I run a test, I get some results, it's all a bit simulated. These tools, all in the data, also collects field data over time from real users, from Chromium browsers with a certain history config, which basically means if your website gets enough traffic from the real world, you start to get performance data from real users. And you get distributions of scores based on different geographies and device types and conditions, rather than just simple scores and numbers. And you can use these to identify problems and opportunities. All of that data feeds into a big Google database, which you can query and visualize through time like this. Your site is probably in this database. Your competitors' sites are probably in here if you're big enough. And you can look at that and you can see how things change. This is really interesting. Core Web Vitals then fixes this it's hard to quantify challenge, which prevents stakeholders from investing, which prevents people from comparing to competitors and so on. Now we have an explicit, universal, comparable metric against our competitors, which ties back to user experience. And from all the research that we know exists, ties back to the bottom line. We have a closed loop now. Now we can spend some time and money and energy. Also worth noting that I'm sure you're all aware, scoring well, there's a motivation to hit these scores because Google rewards fast sites. Whether that's the explicit ranking factors in organic search for getting green across the board, or the kind of more ephemeral benefits to quality score in paid search and similar, doesn't matter. You get compounding effects from scoring well. Higher visibility, more traffic, cheaper ads, more growth, more investment into performance, and so on and so forth. As to, again, learning processes, they even go so far as to give you specific recommendations. They don't just score you and say you did badly. They give you a whole bunch of resources like this, really genuinely great documentation around a lighthouse test performed in your Chrome browser, showing you the metrics for the page you're looking at, which says, here is where to click, here is how to understand what we're telling you, and here, look, this specific image on your page is problematic. Here is the problem, here is when and why it occurs, and here's what to do about it. This stuff is great. And then it links to a whole bunch of deeper case studies and examples, which you can go and look at code examples for different scenarios, which you can use to compare the difference with your own. And even further, takes a step back to look at some of the more abstract principles behind that and explains from basic foundations as to what's important and why and how all of this works. This is phenomenally, really deep, really incredible. And it starts from what is the internet all the way up to how do I make my stuff fast. But of course, it's never as simple as just saying, here's the code, go do the thing. They also support a whole bunch of workflows and processes, things like here are a whole bunch of tooling approaches to allow you to measure and monitor and integrate and analyze as you go. This is really cool. Essentially, all this speed stuff is now a solved problem. There are clear routes to commercial value. The tools, the resources, the motivations exist. So to me, it seems odd for brands to be leaving all this money on the table. So why is that happening? Well, you could argue that perhaps it's because all of this is a bit new in terms of priorities and how businesses behave and invest and so forth. But frankly, we've had the kind of documentation, tools, and processes for measuring this kind of stuff for years now. Yeah, Core Web Vitals only since 2020, but there have been equivalent and reasonable things going back to 2011, 2012. Most sites still aren't performant, and they're not even getting close to following best practice. So there's something else going on. There's another problem, which is preventing organizations from investing, maintaining, and building stuff apart from not having a well-lit path. I think the most likely explanation is either they don't know, people don't have the education and the access, or they don't care. Even if they know that performance is really important and all the tools are available, they don't or can't or won't care enough about their audience to prioritize it. And I think that's a really interesting realization there, which is as you step back and look at the kinds of brands and websites which are scoring poorly and where they're evidently struggling to be user-centric and care about their audience, you start to realize something quite profound. And that's that Core Web Vitals metrics don't just measure speed. This is the key thing I want you to take away today, and we'll go through a bunch of other stuff, but this is critical. Indirectly, your Core Web Vitals metrics also measure a whole bunch of stuff like technical maturity. Maybe the site is built on a legacy stack, which is complex and expensive and slow to change. It measures resource allocation and budget. How much are you or your competitors investing in staying ahead of the curve, reaping new technologies and rewards, being audience-centric, They measure competency and capabilities. Maybe a competitor with bad scores has bad scores because they don't have enough internal dev resource, or their priorities in politics. Maybe their internal stakeholders are putting their time and energy into different areas, or the internal SEO team or agency doesn't have executive buy-in to get things prioritized. And over time, they'll also tell you a lot about trajectory and velocity. If sites are still slow, they've had a lot of time to look at this. What are they working on that isn't speeding up their sites? What big projects have they got baking? You can infer a huge amount of information based on how these sites score. Let's think about why this is important. Let's zoom out for a minute. Existentially, I think many businesses are on a trajectory where the thing that they make or do or sell is increasingly commodified. That's generally true of the world in late-stage capitalism. So they're in a race to the bottom. And as businesses, what we're competing on is either discovery, which is the cost of user acquisition, or brand preference, the effectiveness of our retention and flywheels. And your competitive differentiator in those spaces is how good your touch points are from the perspective of your audience and users versus your competitors. How are you presented? How are you differentiated? How well does your stuff work? How fast is it? It's not just speed, but the totality of user experience. How likely are people to want, to like, to recommend, to shop and spend with you? Speed is a huge part of that. And what you start to realize when you frame it this way is that Core Web Vitals is a phenomenal proxy for quality. Core Web Vitals measures the quality of your website. Yes, speed's a big part of it, but more broadly, quality, at least the user centricity of a website and how much it looks like an organization is committed to providing a good user experience. And yes, the quality of the website isn't necessarily the same as the quality of the organization or the products it sells, but it correlates damn well. You could maybe even argue that Core Web Vitals scores might be a good indicator for whether a brand deserves to be considered featured in a consideration set, which gives us a really nice way to frame how important all of this, which answers our first question of, should I care about this and why is it important? Well, yes, and it is because the quality of your website determines how well it performs. That does not sound profound, I will give you that. But this isn't the way we've historically thought about websites. We haven't had the metrics, the tools, the processes, or the expertise to frame things in this way. But even now that we have those things, there's still a problem because nobody is responsible for quality. In many organizations, it's rare for somebody or a team to own quality. And even though we now have reliable metrics for measuring speed, quality is still abstract and amorphous for now, because that's changing. And the Web Vitals ecosystem isn't just about speed. There is a broader ecosystem evolving here. There are new metrics coming to the Core Web Vitals toolkits. We've already seen emerging metrics like responsiveness and smoothness. When was the last time you checked how smooth your website loads? Have you ever prioritized that? As a user scrolls and interacts, what frame rate does it achieve? How fluid is that motion? You've probably never even looked. But why not? Because when you think about it, it's obvious that providing fluid, smooth interface is part of providing a good user experience. The reason you've never looked at it or prioritized it is because we've never had the metrics to quantify it or prioritize it or to benefit measurably from improving it. Well, now we do, and it's not unrealistic to expect that in the medium term, these metrics there'll be more metrics, they'll measure more aspects of the experience you provide to your users. And they go beyond just speed. That's why core web vital tools like Lighthouse also report on issues in areas like SEO, accessibility, general best practice, etc. These are the same kinds of standardized performance and quality measures for accessibility or for best practice and for security and other areas. And all these in turn sit alongside areas like responsiveness and security and safety. So they're also measuring how well you can, for example, cater to users who rely on assistive technology or have slow network connections or on older network devices. This is an evolving and expanding ecosystem. How well are you supporting users who prefer dark mode in their browser? Are you using Chrome's APIs to detect if the user has limited hardware capabilities or is an old mobile phone? Probably not. But these measures and metrics aren't the end game of having a fast website. They are the first step in an evolving ecosystem that you really need to be optimizing for now. If you're scoring badly today, you are already years behind, and it's time to start catching up. Because these metrics and measurements evolve. They're not set in time. Every year that goes by, they get reviewed and revised, and the thresholds and bars for what good looks like increases. So even if you're scoring well today, you might score poorly tomorrow because the gap between good and great has got wider. So quality is important. We've established that speed can be an enormous competitive advantage because the things that you need to do to improve your speed also improve your content, your media, your marketing, your development processes, your conversion rates, your rankings, your staffing and hiring policies, your internal budget allocations, etc., etc. The brands that invest will leapfrog ahead. It's no coincidence that the word quality shows up over 400 times in Google's documents that they show to employees who evaluate organic search results. Google are measuring quality, and speed is a huge part of that. It would be insane for us not to do the same thing. So what do we do with all of this? How do we do the fast things? Firstly, this isn't all theoretical. This can be done. It is possible to make a perfect website. It is possible to make a website that loads as close to instantaneously as to not make any difference. This is my website. I've cheated a little, but I will buy treats and beers and whatever for anybody who can find anything objectively slow or imperfect about it. Tweet me about it afterwards. I would accept that whilst it has big hero images and content and analytics, it's probably not representative of your websites and businesses. It's fairly simple. It's just my personal site, and I'm the only one working on it, and it's a bit of a hobby, so it doesn't compare well to your challenges. But this one does. This is Yoast.com, and this is almost as fast. And this is complex. We have e-commerce, shopping cart cookies, multiple currencies, internationalization, fast-moving content, caching, security, comments, analytics, surveying, different teams, privacy logistics, integrations, a team of developers working in different areas, priorities, projects, backlogs, etc. As we've improved this and made it faster and smashed the metrics out of the park, we've seen improvements to bounce rates, to conversion rates, to revenue. This is possible if you have a team of performance experts, and if you start from scratch and aren't constrained by any legacy issues, and if you have unlimited resource and timeframes to invest in speed as opposed to, say, running your business, and if you can perfectly predict your future needs so that you're building stuff in a way that it never changes or becomes outdated or outmoded, and if you can keep it performant once you've created it, so you have a governance process around how and when marketing teams are able to add new tracking pixels, or if your content team never embeds any huge images, and if nothing unexpected, say like a global pandemic ever happens, and if technology never changes, and if your users never change, and if your competitors don't keep up. In the real world, it is really, really hard to build a super fast, perfect website. Even if you know what it looks like, and even if you have the resources, it's incredibly hard to keep up. You can't plan well enough. You can't sidestep your technical debt. Even though it's paint by numbers and all of it's well documented and all rewarded, building fast things is really hard. I would argue that it's too hard for almost every business. You can't learn enough or master enough or influence enough or monitor enough or fix enough to get past 80%. And even if you do get somewhere close to very fast, you can't maintain that because stuff changes. I want to convince you that trying to optimize your site to that point is a terrible way to invest your time. I'm a technical SEO and a speed and a nerd, and I spend a lot of time trying to make websites faster, but I don't think for most businesses, that's where they should be spending their time. Good strategy involves knowing which battles not to fight and where to spend your resources. I think that trying to master performance optimization and web standards and image optimization and a dozen other disciplines is not the hill that you or your business needs to die on. You really should be in a position where you can focus on your product and your service quality and your reputation and your brand and the effectiveness of your marketing campaigns. So instead, I think you should get other people to make your website performant and perfect for you. I want to show you how you can leverage the work done by others to speed your website up without you having to touch anything. The secret is that a fast site has 4 foundational pieces, and you can leverage the work of others to put all those into place. I'm going to use some analogies to visualize how they all fit together. You need an operating system, i.e. the software that your site runs on. You need an app store, the add-on features and pieces of that your site's made up from, the functionality at page level. A publishing suite, which is the processes and workflows you use to be productive and to put stuff on pages. And the telco infrastructure, the wires, the cables, the piping that makes all of that work. And in each of those areas, I've selected the best options you can use to plug together to make something that will be fast and stay fast. And these systems are designed to work together, to slot together like Lego. The first part of the solution is, yes, I'm biased somewhat, but fairly obviously either WordPress or Shopify. Now, some of you are undoubtedly fans of either one or the other one, not at all. Please, just for a moment, put aside all preconceptions and opinions of what these systems are or aren't, or good for or aren't good for just a moment. Because whilst they both absolutely have limitations and problems and challenges as content management and e-commerce systems, yes, out the box, they're not perfect and they're not suited perfectly to every use case. But as platforms which provide a universal architecture that enables best practice and solves quietly for problems you didn't even know you had in the background, they are unrivaled. Yes, many of our experiences with these tools are that they are the place I log into to write content and manage web shops. But underneath all of that, they're factories, sophisticated factories and production lines for producing web pages, which inherently are quite fast. They're a set of tooling, a simplified interface on top of a complexity that gets abstracted away. If you're using anything other than these toolkits, chances are you're spending time reinventing the wheel and fighting against problems that these platforms have already solved. And yes, it is incredibly trendy to say, oh, but WordPress isn't good for my specific unique business needs and tech stack, or Shopify doesn't handle our weird, unique e-commerce requirements. It's the kind of thing you hear a lot from newly hired CTOs who have something to prove, or clever disruptive startups who think they know better. Yes, headless websites are trendy, static websites are interesting conceptually, and tools and platforms which do clever JavaScript stuff like Contentful and Gatsby and React are pretty cool, and they have their places. There are definitely good other ways to build websites, other systems you can use. But I have never seen anybody build a truly, never seen anybody build a truly fast, close to perfect website with any of the alternate approaches. All the metrics suggests that no such thing exists because the technical and organizational and resourcing trade-offs make it impossible. I don't want to bully developers or engineers or CTOs. I'm saying we need to have realistic expectations when it comes to what you can achieve and maintain. And aligning those with the expectations with your strategy is important. Hoping that your dev team can make things fast is not a good strategy for making things fast. The second ingredient, again contentious, is AMP. Some of you are undoubtedly fans, some of you are not. Maybe you've never heard of it. If you have heard of it, again, please put aside your preconceptions just for 2 minutes, because in fairness, Google did a terrible job of launching, naming, marketing, and managing it. And there's been a lot of controversy around how Google handled it in the meantime. Put that aside, that's all ancient history. I'm happy to talk afterwards to explore some of the misconceptions, etc., around that if you would like. What's important is that AMP is a library of website components. If you're developing your site and say, I want a navigation menu, or I want a form that has autocomplete, or I want to embed a YouTube video, and I want to automatically ensure that all of those things are performant, accessible, SEO friendly, and best practice, they're plug and play. Just like the Google Play Store and iOS Store enforce performance, quality, and security requirements, AMP does the same thing for web components. You pick your component, you drop in the code, it's done, it's perfect, it remains perfect. So as a universal component library for ensuring that the things on your page are fast and best practice, it is unrivaled. And more broadly, it acts as a performance framework. It does that by setting constraints on things you can't do. It won't let you load 100 slow adverts. It won't let you embed 30 slow auto-playing videos. Oh dear, I've got a bit of a cough. The best way to get a hold of AMP, go to the website, take a look at it. What's really interesting about this is when you combine it with WordPress. This is the source code of my website. And a couple of months ago, I spotted this yellow bit, rel equals module preload. Now, don't worry if you have no idea what this is. I didn't either. I'm a huge performance and optimization nerd. I didn't recognize this. Turns out this was an entirely new experimental browser standard for speeding up how you optimize loading JavaScript performance. Think about this for a moment. My website is automatically improving over time because I'm using the expertise of the people who build and work on the AMP plugin who maintain that system. People who, incidentally, are not only some of the world's smartest and best performance stock developers, but also happen to work for Google. People from Google are working on my website whilst I sleep for free, and as a result, it's faster and using cutting-edge technology that I don't even know about, which means that it ranks higher in Google. How do you compete with that? What's even cooler is this screenshot's out of date. The standards and best practice have moved on since I took this. The attribute's been removed. It's been replaced with a whole bunch of other stuff. This evolves and evolves and evolves. It sure as hell evolves faster than any of my theoretical competitors, and yours could too. Our third magic pillar is Yoast SEO. Yes, a disclaimer, this is a plug. This is indeed the company I work for on the software I work on, but it's here for a reason. Feel free to switch this out for the publishing suite of your choice. But remember, this stack is specifically designed to Lego with all the other bits. I mentioned Yoast specifically for two reasons, beyond just wanting to do a bit of promotion. One is we work with the WordPress core team and Google teams to develop specific code for making all these things plug together like Lego. Really, really nice relationships there. But the other is that the way we load and handle metadata for SEO purposes can actually speed up your site as compared to other approaches and other SEO plugins and using other ways of doing stuff, thanks to some fancy database magic. So doing a lot of SEO stuff can be slow and cumbersome. We're loading lots of tags, doing lots of transformation, evaluating lots of statuses. We actually speed your site up by doing that. So this plays really nicely together. The last magic tool in our arsenal is Cloudflare, a content delivery network that sits in front of your site and performs, frankly, magic. Ostensibly, it's a security, mostly for security, but the performance stuff is unparalleled. Other CDNs exist. You've probably heard of Fastly, maybe Max CDN, and Amazon has some similar services that do some of what Cloudflare does, but don't confuse this with CloudFront, which is a very different product, though they can coexist. But essentially, ignore all those other things. Unless you have a genuinely enormous and genuinely uniquely complex website ecosystem, Cloudflare is the right magic that you need if you're not already using it. Here's what it looks like. It just acts as a layer in front of your website, which means that every time somebody tries to visit your website, it can perform a whole bunch of magic. It can tweak things, adjust things, intercept stuff, stop stuff, start stuff, change how things work, minify your CSS, etc., and serve all of the assets from your website from near to where that person's requesting them. The best thing is there is a free option for this. The paid option starts at like $20, which is even better, but you can go in, you can log in, you can tick some buttons. Yes, please convert all my images to modern formats. Yes, please minify on more JavaScript. This just happens magically. This is the tip of the iceberg. It does 100 other things if you want to be sophisticated. I run some really complex enterprise websites on this. I run some really simple blogs on this, different combinations of checkboxes and tools. Absolutely game-changing. This is the fastest thing that you can do to make your website faster than lightning. Really, really cool. That is it. That is the secret to building a fast website. 4 tools, 4 technology categories, 4 category winners, which work together like Lego to provide you with a framework, which means you don't need to chase perfection because your website does it automatically for you. I run a whole bunch of websites on this, and even as a performance nerd, I sit back and I drink tea and I watch my websites get faster as other people speed them up for me. It takes about 2 days. Sorry, it takes about 30 minutes to set up this ecosystem if you're starting from scratch. I built my website from scratch in about 2 days, content, CSS, the lot, and it's now lightning fast. This stuff is easy. And maybe that feels a bit anticlimactic, but that's kind of the point, because building and maintaining a fast website is a solved problem. But people don't get it right because they don't know what they don't know, or because they choose not to have some toxic combination of preconceptions or ego or fear or corporate politics. Here's something I want to consider and leave you with. Think back to the brands that we looked at earlier. The Dells, the Under Armours, etc. If those companies had adopted the stack I've described, they wouldn't have crappy websites. They wouldn't be alienating and annoying and frustrating their consumers. They wouldn't be losing millions of dollars in revenue. They'd have fast, accessible, performant, user-friendly, future-proof websites. Every single example I've shown you is caused by those brands reinventing the wheel out of ignorance or out of arrogance. They made a bad choice. And that's forgivable if they didn't know what they didn't know, but now you do. You know there's a well-lit path to performance. You know that you need to make your own choice. You can't build and maintain a fast website through hope and hustle. You can only do it with the right tooling. And if you do pick the right road, there is no reason why you can't compete with sites like this. And yes, some of you are undoubtedly thinking, oh, I can do this myself. I'll go back to my organization and work with our engineers to make it faster our own way. We're smart and capable and sophisticated. We can build our own tooling. We don't like WordPress. We don't like AMP. We want to do it ourselves. Yeah. I'm sure you can. Some people can, like Coca-Cola can, Nike can, Forbes can. It can be done, but not without expertise and resources, and perhaps more importantly, not without opportunity cost. These are solved problems that you can just plug in like Lego. Your organization doesn't run its own power plant. You probably don't make your own soap from scratch. For utility level infrastructure and services, it doesn't make sense for you to be investing finite resources in solved problem spaces, especially when many of the best practices solutions are not only free, they're also open source. I want you to get other people to do all this for you. Experts who will allow you to spend your time focusing on marketing and storytelling and brand building and content writing and PR and differentiation and all those other good things. You do that using this stack. In fairness, there are many other routes to speed and performance, but this is the fastest, both to configure and set up and establish and to actually drive speed. You have to fight tooth and claw and nail to adopt this stack and these tools. And any of these quadrants that you're missing one of these, that you have something else, challenge it deeply. Because once you've got all these together, you stop needing to fix things. You stop needing to build and maintain things. And your site gets faster rather than slower. This is how you unlock all of your resource that you spend on janitorial work and spend it on investing in building a brand that can compete against others and so on and so forth. So a quick to-do list. Please check your Core Web Vital scores. Use tools that I've mentioned like GTmetrix or the Lighthouse reports in Chrome to check your Core Web Vital scores. Compare them to your competitors if you want, but really this is less about where's the gap and more about you and how you're doing. If you're not scoring over 90% in each category, start asking questions and exploring where the gaps are. And if you score poorly, start being more concerned. Think about what that says about your organization, your politics, your processes, your priorities, your agility, and more importantly, about how user-centric you are and about how much power your IT department has over your quality of your audience marketing and messaging. Check your stack. If there are gaps in your Core Web Vital score, evaluate all the pieces against that quadrant that I showed. Make sure you're running Cloudflare. If you do nothing else, if you've never heard of it or you're not using it, you know exactly what to do this evening. Compare your stack to my stack and chase perfection. Work on delivering a perfect user experience. Make a perfectly fast site. Make a site that loads instantly, but don't do any of it yourself. Get other people to do it for you, like I do. Go out and win, beat your competitors, delight your audiences, grow your reach, etc., etc. If you haven't already, go get Yoast SEO for WordPress or Shopify. Check out Yoast Academy. Defeat all the monsters, level up, make things fast, eat the cake, etc., etc., etc. That is all we have time for. Look at that, spot on for timing. Well done to anyone who survived that. That was intense. I'm just here on my own now. That's sad, isn't it? Everybody's died. Oh, there we go. Hello.
Hello. Thank you, John. Your presentation is great, futuristic, and full of actionable knowledge. So thank you. It was great.
Awesome.
And you answered some questions already. And we will go ahead and take some time for questions now. Friends, just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your control panel on YouTube. And so we have several questions. Some of them were sent via email and several questions I see in the chat.
Nice.
First, let's take a look at the questions from the emails. And the first will be, I think it will be two questions. Why are the Core Vital scores so drastic between mobile and desktop? And how can I increase website performance on mobile phone?
That's a really good question. So devices have different capabilities for a start. Mobile phones will typically have less hardware. So they will have maybe less RAM, less storage. They'll be on a network connection, which is maybe slower or less reliable than your nice fast desktop Wi-Fi. So there are many things which are going to bottleneck performance. When you're loading a web page, a whole bunch of stuff happens. Your browser needs to communicate with the server at the other end of the pipe, and it needs to fetch every image, every bit of JavaScript, every style sheet, every fragment of HTML. And there's a big shopping list of all the things it's got to go get. So if your mobile phone is constrained by, I've only got a certain amount of throughput, or I can't load more than 3 things at once, that's going to take way longer than it would on a desktop. The secret to making things faster on mobile is to build better websites. And I've given you the stack that you can use some of that. If you're scoring poorly on mobile, I'd be really concerned. The world has changed. Most people browse and shop and make decisions on mobile, even if they're not handing money over on the forms on your website on mobile devices. It's certainly part of their research journey. It's certainly part of the experience that influences who they end up giving money to. For mobile in particular, I would look at areas like image sizes. I'd look at things like lazy loading and making sure that you're not sending 5 megabytes of JavaScript to the device before the page starts showing up. I would look at things like fonts. Custom fonts are always a bit of a bottleneck. They're really slow, particularly on mobile. But yeah, go use the tools I've mentioned, use things like GT metrics, like Lighthouse, and test as a mobile phone. Some of these devices will try and convince you that you're doing a great job by defaulting to desktop. Yay, your site's fast on desktop. Everybody's site's fast on desktop. Set it to mobile phone, accept that 3G, it's going to take 5 seconds, and then go and look to shave off some of your slowest stuff. Be mobile first for this, for sure.
Okay, great. So the next question is, how well does plugins like Nitropack or WPRocket help when it comes to Google and Core Vitals? Is it faking them out?
So they can be really good, and there are 3 I recommend typically. If you're a bit of a nerd and you want to get really deep in the weeds and you want to tinker with 100 settings and you've got a complex site, check out W3 Total Cache for WordPress. Really nice. If you just want something that's plug and play, that you can just plug it in and turn it on, WPRocket is really good. Nitropack are new. Nitropack are quite new to the scene, and I've spent a lot of time talking with their team and exploring it. They got a whole bunch of negative PR when they launched, with people saying, oh, this cheats the scores and it fakes it. It doesn't. It is really clever. It's really sophisticated. It's doing stuff that other plugins aren't when it comes to things like clever lazy loading for JavaScript. That if you don't really know what you're looking at, that can look like it's trying to trick the scores. It really isn't. Nitropack is really clever. The only reason I don't recommend it as my number 1 is it does require a little bit of setup. It's a little bit fiddly sometimes on some sites because performance optimization is complex, and it has a slightly different pricing model. All 3 of these do. But Nitropack involves cost per page view. So if you've got a big site with lots of traffic, that might be quite expensive. But otherwise, find the one that's a good fit for you. Maybe it's none of those, but yeah, they're all a bit different.
Okay, thanks. And the next question, how can I eliminate render blocking elements?
Oh, I mean, the answer is in the question. You eliminate them. If you've got stuff that is blocking your page from rendering, then stop them from blocking it. If that is big chunky JavaScript, then you've got, well, as it often is, then you've got 2 options. Either rewrite it so that it's not blocking your page so that it can load later, so that your HTML and your CSS are prioritized, or bin it. And it's all of your, anything to do with render blocking is going to come to that. Can we load it later? Do we need this at all? Can we split this into 3 little things? And maybe we only need 1 of those to be render blocking. But yeah, like, it's so rare for stuff to genuinely need to be blocking. Fonts never need to be blocking. JavaScript never needs to be blocking. CSS is inherently blocking, but you can load a bunch of it in line. Really, if your issue is render blocking stuff, just work through it and prevent it from blocking.
Okay, great, thank you. And let's turn to the questions in the chat. The question from Yune. Hi, Jono, can it be harmful to my ranking to preload content on a page?
No, well, maybe. Preloading is interesting. So I presume you mean kind of technical preloading, and there's a few ways you can do this. So preloading is when you say to the browser, you include a meta tag or an HTTP header in your page saying, I know that this page is going to need this CSS file. And rather than waiting for the browser to discover that and then go, oh, I best go get this CSS file, you can tell it to load it much, much sooner. You want to be really tactical with this. So you only ever want to do this for stuff that's going to be in the initial viewport. So don't do it for your footer, because you don't need to. You can wait for that. And only do it for stuff that really is critical and important. Because if you do it for 20 things, you're going to block up the entire browser and create a whole bunch of render blocking stuff because you've said, load everything at once. It's really important. And it's just going to freeze and have a breakdown. So yes, it can be harmful if you overuse it or use it poorly or preload stuff that shouldn't be preloaded. But tactically, it's a really powerful tool. I would definitely go and look at what are the 3 most important things that A, are on the screen immediately for the user, and B, take a little while to load because the browser has to discover them and find them. And yeah, ship those faster. It can be really good.
Okay, great. So it works. The next question from Unica. Are there any hacks to speed up my learning process?
Great so I mentioned some tools and documentation. It's a great question. Go look at those. But also, open up your website and open the Chrome developer tools. If you're on Windows, you can do that with F12. I'm sure there's a Mac equivalent. And you get a whole bunch of, there's a whole screen and a whole bunch of tabs. And one of them says network. And if you open up network and refresh the page, you get a waterfall chart. You get a list of every resource that page has loaded, and you get what was the file size. How long did it take? Where did it come from? And you can just look at that. And you don't have to be a massively technical developer to see, okay, we loaded 20 bits of JavaScript and half of them were 10 megabytes. That's a problem. And you can also see things like, okay, what order are these things loading in? I want this image to load really quickly, but it's loading after all of this JavaScript. Maybe we should use a preload. And you can just look at this waterfall chart and say, what order are things loading on? What takes ages? What types of things am I loading that are holding up other stuff? And you can experiment with that a little bit. And then you can go back to tools like Lighthouse, like GTmetrix, and say, okay, I think that this is a bottleneck. What should I do? Maybe preloading's the answer. Maybe unblocking's the answer. And start to cherry pick away with that and measure the impact afterwards using stuff like Lighthouse.
Another question is, Jono, what if my site is already fast? Is there a point at which making it faster won't impact its SEO rank?
Oh, good work. Good work on having a fast site. I don't see many. Yeah, so the ranking boost is tiny, and once you pass all the thresholds, you get it. So it's pretty straightforward. I wouldn't be trying to speed up your site purely for SEO and ranking benefits. I would be trying to speed up your site because a faster site makes more money. And even if it's already fast, making it faster still will make you more money. And also remember, your competitors are in parallel going, we should make our site faster. And if your site is a lot faster than them, that's going to pay dividends in user preference and experience, etc. And also I mentioned, don't forget that the metrics and the measurements are getting harder. Like every time they're reviewed, the thresholds will change, and what feels fast today in your scores that are doing very well, 6 months from now might be average. You might no longer pass those thresholds. So I would keep making it faster, unless your site is literally instantaneous, unless you're loading in 0.4 seconds, in like less than the time it takes somebody to blink or whatever else, then keep going, because it will be worthwhile.
Okay, what if my page is personalized and has very different content for authenticated users, but the same URL? How will be measured the page load speed?
This is a great question. This is a real challenge in the real world, because the core Web Vitals metrics, if you're testing it, fine, you get what you test, but the real user metrics it gathers over time when it's analyzing people in the real world will reflect both versions of that. You will have a whole bunch of data from anonymous, not logged in people, and a whole bunch of data from people who are logged in. And presumably, as is often the case, the logged in ones, it's not going to be cached as well. It's not going to be as fast. You're going to be loading stuff that's going to take a little bit loader. I would look at well, you've got a tough decision to make. The easy answer is look at your site architecture and say, if people are logged in, maybe we should be sending them to a different section or URL, or maybe we should be investing a lot more in things like fragment caching. So we know that if you're logged in, it's actually only this bit of the page that changes. It's the logged in area and the headline. Maybe we can have a setup that's clever enough to statically cache the rest of the page around it, and then only swap that bit out dynamically, and then you mitigate some of those speed hits. But it's always going to be tricky if you have real users who are having genuinely slow experience on a URL. That's what matters. That's what these metrics are trying to fix. So you can't ignore that or avoid it. The answer is you have to make those bits faster or put them elsewhere.
Okay, having pages that start rendering faster help my rankings if we are talking about user experience as a main factor.
That's interesting. So we've covered like core Web Vitals aren't a huge ranking impact, and it's not really about the ranking benefit. But yeah, having faster pages will impact your SEO as well as everything else, and most importantly, conversion and preference and money. Start rendering is an interesting challenge. What you really want to optimize for is the core Web Vitals metrics, which are quite specific, and it's things like how many milliseconds does it take to put something meaningful on the page? How many milliseconds does it take before I can interact with this in a way that it's not frozen? When it starts rendering as part of that might be important, but it might not. Like what happens if it takes ages to start rendering and then finishes rendering really quickly? Or what happens if it starts rendering immediately and then takes an hour to finish? That's only one very small part of the puzzle. This is the problem that Core Web Vitals are designed to fix. It's really hard to measure and quantify speed and to know which bits to improve, because if I make this bit faster, I might make that bit slower. Go and measure using the Core Web Vitals metrics, GTmetrix, Lighthouse, etc., and optimize for those and continue to do so as they evolve over time. Yes, make your things start rendering sooner, but don't focus just on that, and don't focus on that at the expense of something else.
Okay. The next question is in terms of site traffic, when does the page speed factor begin to play a role? How many views per month are we talking about? thousands, millions?
So there is a threshold before your site gets included in Google's real user metrics, the Crux data set. I can't remember what that number is, but it is domain level, like if your domain overall gets enough traffic. And then if you have individual pages that don't get a lot of traffic, they might make inferences from similar pages that they can find. So quite a lot to be in there and to be being able to get real user metrics. But again, that's not the point. If you have 10 visitors a month and your site takes 10 minutes to load, you're going to irritate all 10 of them. The point isn't about the number of visitors. The point is, as I covered, if you're frustrating or annoying consciously or otherwise people, then they're less likely to browse, they're less likely to buy, they're less likely to recommend. Yeah, if you've got 10 people, make your site faster. If you've got 1 million people, make your site faster. It doesn't really matter.
Okay, thank you. That's all questions for now. But guys, the question that makes sense is how can Serpstat help here? And let's me answer that. At first, you can identify loading speed issues on your site in site audit module in Serpstat, and the loading speed report shows issues affecting the site loading times on mobiles and desktops, as well as suggestions on how to fix them. And also you can audit and find technical issues on a specific page of a site here. And I always use our Google Chrome browser extension, Serpstat website SEO checker. There is a section speed and optimization where you can check the download speed for computers and mobiles. So, Jono, are there any points you would like to add or highlight before wrapping up?
No, I don't think so. That's awesome. Hopefully that's useful. It gives people a bit of an overview of how to think about this and why it's important and how to frame it. And then, yeah, go again. There was a lot of stuff in that deck. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of processes. There are links on every slide you can go through and read and explore. Hopefully that's enough to give you the ammunition to get going. So good luck. Yeah, go and make some stuff faster. It'd be nice to see some fast websites on the web.
Oh, thank you. And what I wanted to add, friends, stay tuned for our future webinars and join our Serpstat chats. It's a great opportunity to learn from SEO experts and get answers to your questions on a featured topic. You can also contribute your expertise there. We conduct the Serpstat chat regularly on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Central European Time on our Twitter. So join our Google Calendar to make sure you won't miss our future Twitter chats and webinars. The link in the chat box. And Jono also was our special guest there with the topic of mobile SEO. There is an article dedicated to that on our Serpstat blog. And tomorrow we will have a chat with Montserrat Cano. We will be talking about SEO for international websites. I would be delighted if you joined Monse and me there as well.
That's cool.
So Jono, I appreciate you taking the time to share your Wednesday with us. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. It was great. Guys, thank you for watching, asking questions, and being here with us. It's been a productive day. I really enjoyed this. Have a great rest of the day, Jono. Have a great day and week, guys. And let's meet again at our future events. Cheers. See you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Goodbye.